pick up that barbell and take your strength score all the way to level 20. Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold, while I hoard internet cringe. If you've seen more party members die to gravity and poor decisions than actual dragons, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. In my humble opinion, there are 3 inventions in human history that have irreparably destroyed humanity's trajectory as a species. The invention of the atomic bomb, 3-letter agencies, and the ability to reply directly to messages and comments on the internet. People are so f***ing ready to let their days be ruined by anonymous slap fights on the internet. Oftentimes, people like to imagine an enemy that doesn't actually exist, and then transplant that caricature onto some other anonymous schmuck on the internet that's doing the exact same thing. But here's the kicker. Once you hit that power button on your computer, like fucking magic, all of the mean little people who are destroying America / Britain / Australia / wherever the f*** you live, turn into an inanimate box of wires. It really is a simple concept, and it's astounding to me that so many people have a hard time grasping it. The story I have for you today stars a player who got in such an intense internet slap fight over whether or not clerics fill the role of a healbot that he decided to give up healing entirely, and how the entire game suffered for it. Now, without any further delay, let's go ahead and dive right into the horrifying world of r/RPG-Horror-Stories. Enjoy. This week's story is written by a throwaway account and is titled The Cleric Who Refuses to Heal, Even Himself. Compared to other stories, this is probably not much of a horror story, and I'm more just on the need to write and post so I can vent, especially since it's still fresh, so sorry if I'm rambling and all over the place. We have a cleric who has been playing really well and balanced as both our support and healer, and can pack a punch too when needed for offense. Apparently, he got into an online argument about clerics on Facebook. I don't know where he went for the argument, but he was ranting about it to us on our Discord channel. To sum it up, apparently, he was pissed that some people were arguing about a post on clerics being more than just healers. We chatted about it and basically agreed with Cleric that he really can do pretty nifty damage and even did an OTK on a horde of zombies with his Destroy Undead. We told him to ignore those people, he's an awesome cleric, and to continue just doing him. That is most likely the trigger as to why he started playing more offensively and healed / casted buff spells less frequently. And I get it, I also played Cleric before. They can deal major damage when they decide to be on the offense. Thing is, the Cleric class, at least with how our Cleric plays him in combat, is not built to focus on dealing as much damage as possible, but to be a balance between support, healing, and damage. Cleric started acting a bit strange on the first session we had after he vented at Discord. Although our group's combat dynamics became kinda off, we weren't really bothered by it and just kinda rolled with it. Roleplay-wise, Wizard just lightly pointed out by commenting along the lines of, "Feeling a bit on the violent side today, eh?" when Cleric cheered hard every time he managed to kill any enemies. Our initial nonchalance might be because the enemies we faced were not at high threat levels. At that session, we were more focused on investigation and rallying allies. His behavior, however, also started becoming unpleasant at times. He developed a sort of one-sided rivalry with our fighter. FYI, I also play a fighter, different subclass though, who was our main melee damage dealer, and the wizard whose attack spells focused on AoEs when in combat. He was noticeably projecting the people who argued with him online onto us, especially with comments like, "Oh yeah, now you need the cleric to solve your problems," or, "Damn, good luck guys, I hope you don't die when the cleric's not with you to keep you alive," when our party was separated. Like, bro, none of us ever invalidated your cleric, like ever. What point are you trying to prove to us? Me personally, I got pretty pissed when he once flaunted about how much more damage he did than my fighter, and my response was like, Yeah, duh. Cause unlike our other fighter, I built mine to be a tank and combat support. You know, so he could be the shield and divert attacks away from you guys. Which he just brushed off. The DM has already berated him on it by pointing out that we were not the people that argued or invalidated his cleric class on Facebook. He doesn't need to prove a point to us because we acknowledge his essential role as a cleric, and to stop taking out his frustration on us and our characters. We echoed our DM's sentiments, and he stopped his comments, thankfully. But then shit started to go downhill super fast when we faced off against one of the villains and her servants. Strategy-wise, villain focused more on giving us curses and debuffs, while her minions dealt damage and prevented us from getting to her. Some of us were poisoned, blinded for several turns, frightened, just to name some. It was a frustrating fight, but it was even more frustrating that Cleric refused to cast spells that can resolve our conditions or heal anyone, even himself. Every time it was his turn, he would only cast offensive cleric spells like Guiding Bolt, even using up his higher level spell slots to cast them. Sure, he did damage when his spells hit, but he repeatedly fell unconscious. Especially when he thought it would be a wonderful idea to run headlong into the middle of the enemy crowd to just be surrounded by them, just so he could cast his spiritual guardians. We collectively groaned when he said, "I'm a cleric, I keep the party alive, and the best way to keep the party alive is by killing those who are trying to kill us first." When in combat, Bard, who was usually our strategist, and the one making it easier for all of us to hit and kill things, ended up having to be the main healer with her healing words and healing potions, especially every time Cleric fell unconscious. The situation turned really dire, when it's just the Bard still standing cursed with 1d8 damage every turn and outnumbered 3-1. One of the minions hasn't even been damaged yet. Cleric's player went off on her, telling her to heal him back awake. Desperate and thinking that he would cast Mass Healing Word to get us all back on our feet, she did so. And you know what Cleric decided to do? He used his main action for an offensive cantrip. I forgot the name, but basically those within his melee range get attacked. Then his bonus action to cast Spiritual Weapon at a higher level. Both spells missed. So I'm just now realizing that I have given a lot of attention to paladins and not that much to clerics. Of course, I don't really do D&D guides on the channel, but that may change soon, hint hint. You see, clerics have been given this reputation as the cute little party mom class thanks to other traditional healer types in media. When people think cleric, they think of Mercy from Overwatch, when a more accurate depiction of a D&D cleric would be a sentient wood chipper handing out band-aids and orange slices. Dear listener, clerics do not make love. Clerics I'm not exaggerating when I say that the only thing that could send a bad guy to hell faster than a cleric is a 22-year-old with a Glock 33. I mean, my god, 8 out of 10 shots at 40 yards on a moving target. Remember the name Elijah Dickin because that man is a hero and a fucking Chad. Okay, back on topic before my gun-loving tendencies get me into trouble. One look through the spell list and you can see that clerics have a tool for any situation. Combine that with the ability to wear heavy armor and you got a pretty beefy boy. And if you've ever seen any video on game balance, you'll know that the ability to heal is absolutely busted. That being said, even with all of that, our cleric here still got bodied. In combat, the individual becomes less of a factor, and the team game aspect of D&D comes to the forefront. See, when you take on a class with the ability to heal, you somewhat shoulder the responsibility of keeping everyone else alive too. Clerics are so damn powerful that keeping themselves alive is too trivial, so they need to preserve everyone else too, and everyone knows it. Dungeons & Dragons is a team game. And when your team succeeds, you succeed. If you're gonna have a good time, you gotta ditch the idea that you're out to prove something. Because I'm sure you're really showing those dummies on Reddit how wrong they are by absolutely kamikazing your own D&D group. I'm sure they're just aching to hear all about it. What's even better is that Villain used her turn to attack him. With just the Bard's 5 HP of healing that he got, he was obviously taken out. Again. We were close to a TPK, and even the DM sounded visibly distressed at how the battle was turning out. The Bard managed to survive another enemy round. She was close to being taken out as well, but somehow managed to survive the minion's turn and the villain's turn, and succeeded her save to end her curse. Then it was her turn again. Cleric's player had the audacity to demand her to heal him back awake again. She ignored him and woke me instead with her last potion, because I was exactly next on the turn order, and also had a potion to help another player. Cleric groaned and demeaned her for it. She replied with, "Since she's a character with a strong strategic mind, given what just went down, it was what she would have done." Which has got to be one of the most satisfying, "It's what my character would do," that I have ever heard. I then managed to give the fighter, who I might add was on his last death save, the only potion I had. Then I used Action Surge to finish off a minion with disadvantage because I was still fucking poisoned. And Commander Strike the fighter into attacking the villain who was next to him, and landing a whopping huge nat 20 damage on her. Still not dead though. Wizard's death save came up next, and by some digital dice miracle, he also rolled a nat 20 and was revived with 1 HP. Now this is where we get a bit sidetracked, because this is the first time anyone rolled a nat 20 on a death save. We weren't sure if Wizard was allowed to do anything on the turn that he was revived by a nat 20 death save. But regardless, the DM decided to allow one action, and will apply it for any future nat 20 death saves in his games. Anyway, the Wizard used the Scorcher spell. Forgot the full name, but basically fire damage in a straight line, at a higher level, and killed the villain. We ended that session by dragging the last living minion back to our base. We stuck around longer after that in the voice channel to discuss the session and did a bit of analysis on the combat, with some metagaming knowledge. Cleric's player was pissed, and complained that he could have finished that fight and gotten us out of all of that situation faster if Bard had healed him. DM challenged him on that, and asked him what he would have done if Bard chose to heal him awake again. And he said that he would do the exact same thing that he did with the missed spells. As how I've laid out the battle went down above, even if he managed to land both spells and took out the villain, they'd still end up getting wiped out by the 2 remaining enemies with what's left of their HPs. That was one thing, but then Bard brought up an interesting point. Wait, how many spell slots do you even have left? He stalled a little in answering, by saying he'll check his character sheet, and stumbled in his words. Guess what? He only had his cantrips left, and several low-level spell slots. His spiritual weapon would have been casted at its lowest level if he pulled through on his plans, which means even if he landed both spells at full damage, he and Bard would have been wiped out on the enemy's turn. The revelation made things awkward in the chat for a moment, so DM directed the conversation to the fighter and Wizard's nat 20 miracles that had happened at the last moment. Fighter also added that even he wasn't sure that we would have won despite his nat 20, and even revealed that during the combat he PM'd the DM for some way to let him sacrifice his characters so that the others can survive and escape. I gave a bit of an input/question on the encounter's difficulty level, and the Cleric chimed in that he thought that the encounter was too rough. The DM told us that although the encounter was made to be difficult, befitting one of the main villains, it wasn't the most difficult encounter we had faced compared to some other high-threat encounters we had had. He pointed out that we fought harder enemies before, with even worse rolls. For some reason, we had several Snake Eyes rolls on one of the encounters, LOL. Plus, we were even at a lower level back then, and still managed to beat them. At some point of our discussion, Wizard went frontal with Cleric, asking why he wouldn't heal anyone, even himself, and that it wasn't cool to make Bard deplete a lot of her spell slots for healing words, while he kept on abandoning us like that when we were dying. Cleric got defensive and argued back that everyone else had a form of healing/self-healing to take care of themselves except for Wizard. But even then, he also had a potion, which is why Cleric assumed that everyone will be fine. He got rebutted on that when we pointed out that everyone, including himself, was knocked out except for Bard, and Fighter was so close in making a new character with his 2 failed death saves. I don't remember what else was argued, but I think it struck a chord in Cleric, who got pretty quiet when Wizard, more or less, said something like, "If you have now stopped caring about our characters, at the very least you could still try to care about your own character, instead of caring more about proving a point to a bunch of internet strangers you argued with like 3 weeks ago. They're not even here to watch our sessions and see you prove them wrong. Hell, even if they were watching our sessions, you're not exactly proving yourself right either." We echoed Wizard's feelings before Cleric just abruptly left the voice channel. Not sure what's gonna happen next session, but the DM says he'll discuss things with Cleric after giving him much needed time to cool off. And that's where we are now. I don't know how to end this post. I feel better after regurgitating this out in writing though. Have a good week, I guess. So, anyone gonna tell this guy that the very concept of being the healer implies that you hold the fate of literally the entire party in your hands? When you really think about it, playing healer is the ideal position for any budding spotlight hog. So, what's the holdup here? Apparently, it's the internet. I just finished reading a book called The Defining Decade, which I highly recommend, which is about how to live your 20s in the best way possible. And a huge chunk of the book is about how toxic the internet and social media as a whole has been for the development of an entire generation when it comes to literally anything. I know some of you are now rolling your eyes at me because I sound like some kind of boomer, but there's some actual science to this shit. Young people feel as though the way they do things is wrong somehow, because it doesn't match what they see from other people online. But what they don't realize is that they're witnessing exclusively individuals and society's highest highs and lowest lows, while being intentionally kept ignorant to everything else. I think the same logic can be applied to the TTRPG space online. If your only exposure to RPGs is from Reddit, YouTube, Twitch, or any other online platforms, then you're probably being constantly told that the way you play RPGs is wrong somehow. And whether you know it or not, you are internalizing that shit. "Oh, my roleplay is terrible compared to Travis Willingham's. I'm such a bad actor. Oh man, Pack Tactics said that my build is suboptimal. I'm so dumb. My world isn't as nearly as complex as the one Matt Colville makes. I'm such a bad DM. Den of the Drake is criticizing OP for something that I do. I must be so cringeworthy." Look, with the exception of myself, because I have zero talent whatsoever, these people worked hard to obtain their knowledge and skills, and what you see every time they upload is the culmination of all that work in their professional lives, free time, and editing software. If you hold on to anything from this unnecessarily long tangent, hold on to this. Quit focusing on the digital dice being rolled on a digital table by digital people, most of whom are anonymous online. Put the phone down and pay attention to the actual dice being rolled on the actual table with the actual people that you have been gifted. Are you having fun? Yes? Great! Is the internet saying that you're doing it wrong? Yes? F*** 'em. Now, believe it or not, but this post actually has an update for us. Let's go ahead and hope that Cleric gets his shit together and we get a happy ending, because if not, all this standing on my soapbox is gonna have gone to waste. So here is the update that some of you requested, and I'll get straight to the point. We worked things out. We're cool again. And this current post I made has gone through both Cleric and DM for their perusal and approval. For those who don't like to read long posts, that's really all you need to know, I guess. You can move on to some other stories now. For those who want more detail, the next paragraphs await your reading. DM had a talk with Cleric and showed him my previous post. He admitted that he got carried away because he got so salty about people talking shit about Clerics on Facebook. There is always shit talk about any class we all at some point got offended over. People talking shit about classes we love playing, you know? Like rangers being useless, fighters being basic, wizards easily dying, bards are just weaker sorcerers and less effective clerics, etc., etc. Which the DM relayed to Cleric, and told him not to take their words to heart. Some of your comments also helped, so thanks for that, guys. Then they discussed about exactly how Cleric wants to play his character from there on, because it was becoming out of character for his lawful neutral grave cleric to suddenly enjoy killing, and even keeping a kill count in the party. His character is supposed to guard the balance and order of life and death, and his main mission in our story is to put all the undead raised by the big bad evil guy finally to rest. We solved that issue in-game, and he roleplayed it by being frustrated over a previous grievous incident. He apologized to the party after being visited by his god in his dreams, and having a heart-to-heart with our bard. Apparently, DM and Cleric's discussion, they also roped in Bard's player who was free at the time, and seemed relevant, as an example to whatever they were discussing, because in the party she doesn't do damage and had a very little kill count thus far. In direct combat at least, but she gets a lot, if not most of our praise both in and out of combat for her use of spells and the B5. Bard's big bad beautiful bullshit. Basically our term of endearment for Bard's effective shenanigans and strategies. Whatever they discussed together seemed to work. We apologized to him if we made him feel invalidated as a cleric, and for ganging up on him in the last session. He apologized for the way he acted as well. I also apologized for making that post about him and offered to delete it and this account, but he says, nah, let people discuss and learn from it. So, that's it I guess. Thanks guys, have a great week. End of story. Well, in a surprising twist, everything worked out when everyone just, wait for it, sat down and talked about it. Most problems that arise in TTRPGs that eventually end up in my videos happen just because someone has something to say, and they refuse to communicate until it's finally all released in a dramatic tantrum. Hopefully, people can learn from the two lessons that are found in this story. Those being that clear communication prevents disaster, and that tying your identity to a class in a pretend dice rolling game to the point where people talking shit on Facebook ruins your life is pretty fucking dumb. Now before we go, let's take a look at this week's Gallery of the Drake. This week's fan art comes from viewer Peasekey100 and depicts her D&D characters gifting the Drake with a collection of rare gemstones. Such a wholesome moment, I'm sure nothing could ever—
Sir, we can't let you through security with this.
Why? What's wrong with my stuff?
Sir, this is crystal meth, shoddily constructed to look like jewelry.
Okay, lady, it's medicinal. Thank you again, Peasekey100, for submitting your art. If you want to see your artwork featured in Gallery of the Drake, be sure to send it to the email in my About section. Fan art is my favorite part of doing YouTube, and it means the world to me that I can inspire artists like you to create artwork like this. With the story over and artwork displayed, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you feel like supporting the channel further, my Patreon and merchandise links are in the description. I would like to thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you next time in the Den of the Drake.